Everywhere I've turned, somebody has wanted to sacrifice me for my own good. Only they were the ones who benefited.
Hey, look at that. Where did Jimmy carry that yellow woman? In Bessie's room. Where? In Bessie's room. You know where.
Hey, what is all that talk going on around here about Bessie?
My. I don't know.
Say, what's wrong?
Go to your room, honey.
What?
Don't look at me. I told you not to come up here in the first place.
Well, I guess I'll be going now.
Not yet. You got to see me before you go. You little rat. Come in my room.
Hey, Jimmy, get this woman off of me.
I can't do you no good, honey.
Say, what are you doing with her in here?
Yeah, y'all can't raise all this sand in here. What's the matter with y'all?
What's the trouble with you?
Well, look here, I'm the janitor and I don't want
I don't care who you is. I don't care if you're the landlord. You ain't got nothing to do with my business.
You gonna move.
I don't care. Let me move.
You gonna move.
Don't I pay my rent?
Come on out, you gonna move.
Yeah.
Don't you hit me. What's the... Now, get out. Well, look here. Now, wait a minute, Cliff. Grab the woman.
Jimmy, don't leave me. Jimmy, please don't leave your Bessie. Jimmy, you ain't gonna leave me, are you?
Woman, I'll be gone before the evening sun goes down.
Jimmy, don't I give you everything you say you want?
What have I got?
I give you clothes.
Clothes.
I give you suits.
Suits?
Yeah.
Singular, baby, not plural. One suit, that's all. One suit.
Don't leave me, Jimmy.
Oh, woman, get out my face.
Jimmy. Oh, Bessie.
1929, this movie classic, St. Louis Blues, starring Bessie Smith, was yet another part of a legacy legitimizing stereotypical images and toxic relationships between Black people. Here we see colorism at its worst when a cheating man demonstrates preference for a lighter-skinned woman over his dark-skinned woman. This woman is then depicted groveling to keep him and him kicking her like a dog. Those images were 90 years ago, and they still persist today. Blackface. Even the show Good Times, seeming to suggest we enjoy poverty, and eventually when the main characters eventually left after endless battles over inappropriate scripts and stereotypes, yes, we were being brainwashed into believing this was empowering entertainment when it was just another form of denigration. The only difference now is that we don't just act in these type of productions, we write and produce them. This is Dr. Michelle, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Tabernacle Talks. And I am so excited today to welcome my guest. Today we're going to be talking a pretty long question, pretty huge question, but I think a pretty important question. Has societal cravings for shock and awe resulted in a decline of cultural sensitivity and pride? And for me to unpack this today, I could not do a topic this big and this controversial without inviting two just wonderful professionals that I've known for some time. First, we have Dr. Barbara Mevin and we have Dr. Sabrina Harrison-Dean. Welcome to Tabernacle Talks, both of you.
Thank you.
Now, before we get started, I want you each just to kind of tell the audience a little bit about yourself. So, Dr. Mevin, if we can start with you.
Okay, as you said, I'm Dr. Barbara Mebin, and I live in Indianapolis. I have been an educator all of my, my career. In various capacities, starting with English teacher, counselor, IB coordinator, instructional coach, and so on. Currently I'm retired, and I simply it's not so simple, but I just do some online teaching at this time. But I'm very happy to be here and sharing this very interesting topic.
Wonderful. Thanks, Dr. Mebane. Dr. Harrison Dean.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Sabrina Harrison Dean, and I have been a registered nurse for more than 25 years. And I am currently in the California area working as a healthcare management executive. And also, prior to COVID, which we're kind of back in a COVID season now, I was in New York and also Texas on the front line fighting COVID, which was a phenomenal experience to be there on the front line, especially in New York. I was there March through June of 2020.
Wow.
And
You're in California. I envy you. So thank and I applaud you for being a frontline worker. And that's not easy to do during these times. So I applaud you for that. Okay, I think we're gonna jump right in. Obviously we're talking about a decline of cultural sensitivity and pride. And I want to start off. There was a research article that I found talking about the research article was talking about exploitation, cultural appropriation, and degradation. It was written by Shanice Thompson, and she writes, and I want to quote this: from the return of the booty to the growing population of white rappers and the appearance of decidedly urban apparel in high society, it begins to look as though Black culture is increasingly profitable for everyone except Black people. So apparently, Black culture is in style and profitable. What are your feelings about what Shanice Thompson is saying? And either of you can just jump in.
Well,
I
I
feel
agree
what
with her from the vantage point of there's nothing new under the sun. If you look back in history, you'll see that historically, Black people have been exploited by the white culture. You know, historically beginning with slavery and sharecropping and with our talent in the record industry not being paid what they should have been paid, and basically what is exploited is our human vulnerability.
Interesting. Dr. Dean.
I feel what Shanice is saying regarding the booty and BBL, Brazilian butt lift, that's prevalent not only for white Americans, but Black Americans also. White rappers have been around since I was younger. Beastie Boys, Eminem, and Vanilla Ice are just a few that I listened to when I was younger. And then also the urban attire in high society. I mean, I agree with what you're saying. Some of the gentlemen today are wearing suits with sneakers. So at a high society function, they have on a pair of Kohans, which is a brand that is a sneaker that men feel, is more comfortable versus being in a hard sole shoe. So I feel that other races emulate Black, and I've seen it since I was younger. From the skin tanning to we tend to have fuller lips to the Botox for the lips, and the list goes on and on and on. Um, so she's saying that we're not capitalizing on it. Well, why aren't we? We have brands, so why aren't the brands out there? There's several entrepreneurs, because I'm an entrepreneur also on the side, but why don't the entrepreneurs get the light to be profiled?
Interesting. And I guess, it's interesting that we talk about nothing's new under the sun. Maybe Shanice is just catching up because I think there's always been an ability to appropriate, and they've been doing it. I do find what's interesting now is the physical appropriation of our actual appearance, which is becoming interesting. Black women have always had full figures, and at some point that was a point of shame. Now
Hmm.
it's style, and it's now beautiful now because European women are now, like you say, botoxing and using the Brazilian lifts to capture something that to me is that's not new under the sun. It's just all of a sudden it's considered culturally okay to be round. and that's interesting to me. Okay, let's go on to Mara Sadiqwu changes the view a little bit, and they talk about exploitation of our pain. People have made millions, videos, television. In fact, cops ran for about 31 years. And it wasn't until we had the recent issue with George Floyd and a lot of the protests against police brutality that it kind of disappeared from the airwaves. But there were calls for cops to be taken off the airwaves for years, and it never happened. The real problem, though, is that this trauma, and I think you talked about that, Dr. Jean, this trauma becomes profitable because our pain has become profitable. Um, why do you think we bear any responsibility for some of this being on the airwaves?
Yes, I do believe that we bear some of the responsibility because we all have choices. And depending on our choice, there's a consequence. So what gets captured on media is usually a negative consequence of a choice that we make. So I think that we ought to be, mindful of the choices that we make. So the whole world, you know, thrives on this energy, and then because of the negative consequence that's displayed in the media, some people may, stereotype African Americans in one view, where that's not reality, even though it's reality TV, but it's not my reality. So everyone is not the same, and we all have different choices, and with those choices comes different consequences.
Okay, Dr. Mebane.
Well, I think that the choice. I agree. The choices we make and have consequences. I think that living in a capitalistic society really uh, enhances, or in the minds of some gives them permission to maybe make poor choices because I need the money. I can make the money. I think that we talk a lot about this, but we fail to sometimes applaud the actors who say, no, I'm not doing that. I think about someone like Cicely Tyson, who never ever compromised her values. And I think this whole conversation has to do with values, and what are values? How do we unpack values? Where is the what we used to call home training? Where do we decide that to do this is prideful, to do that is not? Where do we love ourselves? When do we love ourselves? I see a lot of things that are happening because of capitalism, but because also of a lack of self-love. I also think as society moves forward, so to speak, uh, parents don't want their children to go through. You hear it all the time. Well, I don't want my children to go through what I went through. So children become more relaxed and try to believe that they can do what someone else of another color can do. I'll never forget, when I was still teaching, I had a young man. We were during our 1 week of Black History, we were talking about Rosa Parks, and he said to me in all earnestness, but we talked about her not being able to, sit where she wanted to, but he said, but at least she had somewhere to sit. He didn't really understand the
Wow.
significance of what she was doing. And this let me know. And I didn't scold him because he was earnest, because he didn't know or hadn't been taught our history and the struggles that we've had. So I see a lot of this coming from, this whole spectrum that we're talking about today is you can do anything you want, but we don't talk about the responsibility that comes with doing certain things. And I think the key word here is responsibility. How do you unpack values? How do you unpack pride? I didn't mean to go on so long, but
That's okay. Well, it's interesting because when you talk about this attack, not just on us physically, psychologically, we're now starting to see even Black love being portrayed in very negative ways on reality TV. And I'm particularly thinking about the role of Black men, how they are characterized in many of these mainstream reality shows as not valuing Black women, and instead are valuing every gender, every nationality under the sun except Black women. And I guess, how do you see that as a blatant? Do you see that as a blatant affront? Do you see that as people are simply able to choose and do what they want to do? And do you find that these relationships are balanced? I'll start with you, Sabrina. What do you see?
Well, first, I feel that, as I said before, everyone has a choice. So, it's your prerogative, as Mike Brown would say. Whatever you want to do, it's totally up to you. However, just know that everyone doesn't feel that way. Some people feel because you're an African American woman that you should marry an African American man. So, if you choose to do otherwise, just know that unfortunately you may come across some hard times, or you have to develop some thick skin because other people may voice their opinion. So that's just something that I believe comes with that. Um, but everyone has their own choice.
Okay. Dr. Mebane.
well, I think it depends on, which lens you want to look at that through. You could say that it's the Black man's quest or search to be like the white man, to have a white woman. You could say, because I'm sure we all know couples who, interracial couples that people marry or date who they fall in love with. We've all heard love has no color. So I think it is a matter of do I feel like being the angry Black woman today and saying, well, because I'm Black, no one wants me or wants to date me or marry me, or, you know, there has been controversy too if with our race about colorism. If you can't get a white woman, then you want the lightest Black woman that you can get. So it depends on, for me, it depends on the perspective that I wish to pursue at any given time. But when I see these stars or celebrities seeming to, you know, uh, um, be addicted to just one thing or one type, then I do question what psychological barriers or desires are in their hearts or in their heads. What have they been taught? Are they still living under the guise of, if it's white, it must be right? Or are they simply following their hearts? So it's again, like Dr. Dean said, it's about choice. But I think people have to unpack within themselves, why do I make these choices?
Interesting. Yeah, I know I did research for another project that I was working on, and I think it was interesting research that said it's not that Black women are angry about these biracial relationships. We're not. I think the anger comes from being characterized that we are mean, being characterized that we are unlovable. And it's those characterizations where the anger comes from, or that we're not worthy. I'm like Dr. Jean, your choice of who you choose to fall in love with is your choice. But don't turn around and then mischaracterize that the reason I chose is because Black women do X, Y, Z.
Right.
Then I think that feeds into the stereotype. And I think that's what makes toxic relationships in our community. Okay, I'm going to put you guys on the spot now. I don't know if you guys have been watching reality TV or a lot of the internet memes, but Monique, the comedian, recently came out video. She apparently was traveling and she observed some young Black women in the airport and they were preparing for travel. And she noted and actually had, I guess, someone with her take video.
I saw so many, actually too many to count and too many for me to tap. But I saw so many of our young sisters in head bonnets, scarves, slippers, pajamas, blankets wrapped around them, and this is how they're showing up to the airport. And I've been seeing it, not just at the airport, I've been seeing it at the store, at the mall. I've been seeing sisters showing up with these bonnets and headscarves and their slippers. And the question that I'm having to you, my sweet babies, when did we lose pride in representing ourselves?
Criticism was very swift when she came out with that messaging. I'm gonna start with you, Dr. Dean. What do you think about Monique's position in terms of trying to offer some constructive criticism to the sisters that she saw in the airport? You know, when you know better, you do better.
I believe that Monique did her part. I too have seen people, young ladies out that appear to be pajamas and their bonnets on. I think that it's inappropriate. I think that that's something that should remain in the home. However, I don't know everyone's situation. Now the bonnet, that's one thing that they can control, but the pajamas, that may be all the clothing that they have. I don't know their situation, but the bonnet is something that they could definitely take off. Another thing is, I think that influencers such as Cardi B, etc., they are not pushing that, which is a good thing. But I think that sometimes people, as you said, Dr. Michelle, when you know better, you do better. They may not know, as Dr. McBain said earlier, as far as having some home training, or again, it may be, resources. That might be all the clothing that they have. But again, by saying something and not being quiet, I think you can kind of get to the root. I wonder why Monique didn't approach the women when she saw them and talk to them individually.
Yeah, good point. When she saw them, it probably would have been a lot more impactful. Okay, Dr. Mebane, what say you on this question?
I agree with Dr. Dean in that she did her part. One thing that I noted when I watched that was that she had to be bleeped several times because of her own language. I wish that had not happened, but I do, in talking to young people, in my world, you don't really do that. But she did her part. She made an effort to draw attention to something that I deem to be inappropriate. I do agree with Dr. Dean, and I don't know everyone's situation, but I've seen photos of some of the poorest of the poor, and none of them had on slippers or bonnets. What I'm saying is, again, it's a choice. And it's, for some people, this is what makes me comfortable. And I don't know if speaking to them in public with the way people attack people now physically would have been a wise move. I think what she did, if anyone cared to look at it, she targeted a larger audience. But I think hopefully that she was able to make some people reflect on their own behavior, or make some parents, I've talked a lot about home training, but we have a lot of very, very young parents now. And I think that she did what she could in that moment. She spoke what was on her heart to reach these these young women. But I'm not really sure if we're in a society that cares.
Well, I would say I know when I used to take my daughter to school, it was very common. You literally would just see mom roll out of bed, walking the child to the door. But I said, you know what? She's getting them to school.
She's getting them,
So,
yeah, exactly.
so if that's what it takes, you don't have to be glammed out. Just get them to school. So I guess I had to applaud them, say, you know what? If that's the worst thing you got to do, that's fine. Because there's some mom that's not going to get you there or get you there late because they're trying to
Right,
put their frontal on and their, everything else on. And then
exactly.
by the time they do all that, the child's an hour late. So, you try to have it both ways. But I agree. I think there has to be a level of, there are just some lines we don't cross, and that we have a certain pride that, be clean when you go out. I guess that would be my thing. If you
Hmm.
clean, if you got to have the bonnet on, that's fine. Just,
Hmm.
you know, be clean when you're out. Okay. About
I,
every day
I
of the
think
week.
as a teacher, and I would wonder, what are solutions? You know, what are what do we do? Monique did her part, but on a day-to-day basis, of course, I'm not in the school anymore. I do belong to organizations, etc. But what are some things, problem-solving activities for these kinds of behaviors? I mean, it's great to sit around and talk about them and say, oh, no, that's not right, or, whatever. But, somewhere along the line, we have to determine how we reach people and how we solve these kinds of challenges. I won't call them problems, these kinds of challenges.
Well, I agree with you. I think some of the dress codes, I mean, even adults, these aren't even just problems with your children. Every probably major organization has a dress code that's violated daily
Hmm.
because people just, they want to do what they want to do. And they figure, I'm here. The least of your worries should be how I'm dressed. But I do think when we use words like dress appropriately, that could go on a spectrum from here to the end of the moon, that people really need to see, if we're saying that you cannot wear a short skirt to school, this is what we're talking about in terms of length. Because short to me could be different than short to you. I mean,
Hmm.
I've seen these shorts out now where I'm like, are those panties or are those shorts? And
Exactly.
these girls are just walking around in them, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, those are underwear, but they're shorts. So I think each generation has a whole different line in terms of what they consider acceptable. It's and they probably look at us and say, I'm not wearing those granny shorts down,
Right,
my
exactly.
baby.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would agree with both you and Dr. McBain regarding, the generations. It's different. It's just totally different. And Dr. Mobley, as you just said, that the shorts that the young ladies wear. When I was younger with the Daisy Duke, from the Dukes of Hazzard that Daisy on there, she wore. But now it's actually the shorts that you said that resemble panties, like when the women that were in high school, they play volleyball, the little shorts that
Yes.
they wear those out. They wear those out in public.
Wow.
And another thing is, in my generation, it was more, to cover up per se, um, to leave the imagination for the man, and with some younger, um, it show everything. So,
You've seen some of those
why do
acrylic
that?
dresses, right? Somebody showed me an actual acrylic dress. I'm like, that's acrylic. That's, you know, you had to be highly confident, to wear an acrylic dress. Okay. or just about every episode of I don't know if you guys watch some of the television shows with these reunion shows, but uh I guess you start to see a pattern that it's okay to fight on television now. It's okay to be bleeped every other word now because you clearly know from their mouth what they're saying. So I don't even know that the bleep is really even effective. And I guess what's troubling is we all know reality TV really isn't real. A lot of that is scripted. So the actors themselves actually know in advance what they're being asked to do and what's going to be filmed. Uh, does that make it worse that it's scripted? I'll start with you, Dr. Mevin. Does it make it worse?
Yes, because for me it makes it worse. I don't really watch those shows. That's one of the I'm not a big television watcher. I'm a reader. And I do like PBS and, some shows. But, I remember when Jerry Springer first came on. That was one of the, and remains, if it's still on, one of the shows that I absolutely refused to watch because it was scripted. At that time, it was mostly people of color making absolute fools of themselves for I don't know what the money amount was, but was it really worth it? So for me, yes, it makes it worse to know that I'm going to go in and act like this for money. And no one seems to be, I know I'm dating myself, but you always had in the back of your mind, what would my mom think? What would my dad think? And I don't see that.
I know there used to be a time where you would actually go in shadow and you wouldn't show your face, but now people will go on Maury and say, who's the dad, who's the father of my baby, and it could be
exactly
5 choices, and they show their faces. There is no shame in doing that. Dr. Dean, what are your comments?
I agree also that it does make it worse. And where reality TV, as you said, reality TV isn't my reality. I believe reality TV is a more of a facade. And some people, can differentiate between real and this is, real and fake, or, it being a facade. That's not real, even though it's called reality TV. But to dig a little bit even further, what bothers me are the producers, some of the producers. So Mona Scott King, she's a Black woman.
Yes.
That's writing these scripts for the other Black people to say, as well as Sonny O'Neill, who is a Black woman, for Basketball Wives, and the script that she writes. And you see the fights, etc. If you watch that show, that series. So why is that? Why they're capitalizing off of it? But do I agree with it? No. And I think it starts with the people that are being it, even though yes, it's about money for them, I would assume. But as Dr. McBain said, where are your values? Okay, I understand you're trying to rise, etc. But where are your values? There's things that you're not just going to do everything, but some people do.
I think you make an excellent point that I think it gives the executive producers cover when I can say that I have a Black producer writing this, so you can't hold me accountable for those negative stereotypes or imagery because I didn't write it. Your people are writing this about your people.
About you, yeah.
I think that's what's shameful. I think that's what's so shameful about it. Absolutely. Okay, I don't. VH1. I'm picking on all the the major ones here. The Bobby and Whitney reality show that came on. I am a diehard Whitney Houston fan. And I think anyone who knows Whitney pre-drug problem Whitney knows that what we saw on VH1 was not the Whitney Houston that many of us saw. And I think that was once again, she was being exploited. Her pain was being exploited. Her trauma was being exploited. Her addiction was being exploited. And I remember one of the actual segments where Bobby is actually talking about how he has to help her in the bathroom with her bathroom hygiene. And for anyone to know how iconic Whitney Houston was, to actually be placed in a position where Bobby is now saying, basically I have to help her in the bathroom. And the show, when it was canceled, it's because she didn't want to do it anymore. It wasn't because we weren't watching this downward spiral. What do you feel about the people? I mean, we all know who her producer was, made millions and millions of dollars off of her, not being a better handler and making sure that we didn't see such an iconic fall. What responsibility do they have, or do they have any responsibility at all?
Well, again, I've never seen that show, but just your description lets me know that, as I said earlier, they were exploiting her vulnerability, her addiction, whatever. They were taking advantage of that, and I don't feel as if her handlers, again going back to the capitalistic society, feel any responsibility other than how much money can I make from this. That is what they feel responsible for. If I've not made X amount of dollars, then this wasn't any good, or she and or Bobby were of no use for me. I don't see people who show our vulnerability as a people showing it to heal us. They're showing it to still sell us, as they all have always done. History tells us that we were brought here to be sold.
Wow. Powerful comment, Dr. Mebane. What say you, Dr. Dean?
Yes, Dr. Mebane and Dr. Mobley, I agree with both of you. It comes down to the money. It comes down to the money again, and I agree. Whitney had, from what was told to her, that she had a substance abuse issue, along with Bobby Brown. Both of them had substance abuse issues. And I think that the producers, absolutely, they capitalized on that to make money. Now, I'm not sure how much money Whitney and Bobby made from that, but I think, again, to show the negative life of an iconic figure was just inappropriate. It's just really inappropriate. However, Whitney and Bobby consented to it also, so they knew, so.
Choice, again, like you've pointed out earlier, choice.
Yes, choice. And I think that you're right, because I don't want anyone to listen to this conversation and think that we're blaming, that we're victim blaming, that we don't have any responsibility, because we all now are watching the R. Kelly trial unfold, and some of the accusations and things that are happening with him are beyond believable, because this is one of our own doing this to us, and he wasn't alone, apparently, in the things that are being reported, that his handlers clearly knew that he had this predilection for young women, and would go out and actually seek these young women, including some parents who were basically saying, hey, we're going to let you ride along with this 27, 28-year-old man when you're still underage, and everybody looking the other way. And and how do you feel, how are your thoughts when we're actually exploiting ourselves within our own community, and we can't blame anybody else for that? I'll start with you, Dr. Dean.
I feel it's embarrassing, because I don't know if it's real or not. He hasn't been found guilty yet. He's still incarcerated. However, the one thing that always comes to my mind is R. Kelly did not do this alone. So he's behind bars, but as you said, the people that looked the other way or were getting paid, whatever was going on, I think when a child is involved, that everybody involved should be behind bars.
Yes.
Because they all played a role, for this to occur. And I just think it's ludicrous.
Yeah, you almost think if people had been more serious about it when Aaliyah was married to him, she was what,
Yeah,
15, and he was 27,
yeah.
maybe years ago, and we're looking what, 20 years ago that she died, I believe, 20-year anniversary of her death. 20 years ago, this could have been stopped if someone had come forward and said, well, we're not just going to annul a marriage. We're going to go after a person who married a 15-year-old child.
Yeah.
But because everybody looked the other way, he had another 20 years, 18 to 20 years of doing the same thing. What say you, Dr. Mebane?
I say exactly the same thing. It's embarrassing and it's morally wrong. More than anything else, it's morally wrong to take advantage of anyone, and most especially a child. And I have a daughter who, at 15, I would not. I mean, we couldn't even have a conversation about that, about being with someone 27
On a tour bus, and I'm not
on a
on.
tour. Right, right, exactly. Exactly. It
She would have been
just,
mad at me. She would have been mad at me because I would be like, oh, where are we going this weekend?
uh-huh,
Because I would have been packed on the bus
right,
Yeah.
just for her. Okay.
right. So, we go back to what are her family's values, and how do they value her?
Wow. Okay, I'm going to talk about Nick Cannon. Everybody loves Nick Cannon, but he recently did an article, and he was, talking about his 7 children, how he's able to take care of them, and how he has 4 baby mamas. And when people were saying, do you believe in monogamy? Oh, no, that's a European concept. And he's not able to accept that. So I guess he's just going to spread his love and wings across America, which of course plays to one of the worst stereotypes about Black men fathering children and not
Mm-hmm.
being present in the home. And I think what that brother missed for me was, it's not about your money, Nick. It's about your presence. It's
Mm-hmm.
about your presence in the home.
Mm-hmm.
And if, I believe 4 of those children, they've been born in the same year. So when
Mm-hmm.
you got kids that are just being born all over the place, and your only response is, well, I can take care of them. What say you? I'll start with you, Dr. Mebane. What say you about that?
Well, responsibility is more than financial. Responsibility is being the best person you can be for your child or children. Um, if you look at parents who have maybe 7, 8 children, and children will write, my parents sent every one of us to college and we didn't have lots of money, but they found a way to do it. Their parents were present. Their parents had values for them as people, and for them to be educated people to take care of themselves. So to say I can afford it, for me, is simply not enough. Just like I read maybe it was Cardi B, but I don't quote me on that, bought her child a $48,000 purse. That's a year of college or 2 for someone. What kind of values are those? Simply because you have the money, many people think, well, I have the money, so I can abuse you. I can disrespect you. I don't even have to acknowledge you because money talks.
Wow. Dr. Dean.
Yes, I believe that there's again, as Dr. McBain, there's more to raising a child than money. People, some men, years they pay their child support, right? So their money portion is there, but it's more to it. The biggest part is the mental aspect of
Mm-hmm.
me knowing my parent that's paying the money, because I'm half my mom, I'm half my dad. So by being around the parent that's paying the money, you can learn some things from that parent, hopefully some good things, or learn more about yourself, why you do certain things or react certain ways, because it's in your DNA from that parent.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's the long run impact, especially children that I have talked to that grew up in single parent homes. And when that parent, the paying parent, wasn't around, they had questions, or that parent died. And so now those questions will never be answered because they never formally had a relationship with the parent.
I hope he gets enough criticism to understand that, it's easy to write a check when you're a millionaire. That doesn't show any level of involvement. I would be more appreciative if he was working 3 jobs writing that check, but that's not what
Mm-hmm.
he's doing. He's writing a check, and he's got millions of dollars. And I think in the long run, I hope that he really makes a concerted effort to be involved in those children's lives, because being a parent, it's not even just about the money. That's
Mm-mm.
that's not what being a parent is about. And I hope that somebody pulls him to the side and gives him some constructive criticism to say, that, you know, somehow celebrating that doesn't advance our culture, because that's just panders to some of the worst stereotypes about Black men. And so hopefully he'll write that another way when he's interviewed again. Maybe he'll clean that up. My final question, I guess, for the group. Many of you know that there's this term now called cultural appropriation that's in the music industry now, and in every industry, that I can take something from a culture that I probably don't know anything about and either celebrate that or copy that all again, for whether that be just for views, for likes, just to say I'm audacious. And some examples of that would be, we've seen major sport teams mimic the indigenous people's culture by the headdress, painting their faces. We've seen a lot of European women wearing cornrows, um, cultural appropriation. And Lizzo and Cardi B recently released a video where you can see a little bit of African, Greek, um, Egyptian culture. And so there have been calls for saying, you know what, African Americans, you guys are always talking about cultural appropriation. Well, there was a Greek gentleman on Reddit. He was just furious. He said, Black people, you know very little about Greek culture, the things that are religious to us in nature. And now you are doing cultural appropriation, the very thing you say we're not supposed to do to you. What do you say about that? And I'll start with you, Dr. Dean.
What I say about that is, um, years and years and years, and it's actually still happening today with the cultural inappropriateness. Um, Everyone has a choice. I think that the bottom line, though, it's about the money. It's about the money, what sells, and what's going to draw people to buy the product. Do I agree with it? No, I don't. I don't think that any race should be exploited. None. But again, these are choices. I'm not exactly sure who wrote the music, if Cardi B, etc. But I would say it's more to that with Cardi B and Lizzo than just them two. So there's some producers behind that, etc. So um, there's, everyone involved, I feel is responsible.
Dr. Mebane, what say you?
Well, I say that there is a huge difference between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation. To appreciate a culture is to earnestly learn about it, and not to exploit it, um, not to adopt it as your own. And I'm thinking of Rachel, what was her name? Rachel Dolence. Am I saying that correctly? The white woman who uh, um, was the NAACP chair or whatever. She comes to mind, especially in 20 after she was found out, so to speak. She was then I won't use the word convicted, but she was charged with some type of welfare fraud, which also fit into a stereotype. And I'm not saying that white people aren't on welfare, but with Rachel's background, it was as if she were adopting a habit that had been attributed to us. I'm all for cultural appreciation, diversity, and for learning about one another, but just to use, again, it's using people, using culture. And many of the ways that we act according to, or things that we do according to author Brittany Cooper, makes white people feel very comfortable. When we talk about the minstrel shows, the buffoonery, all the stuff we see that is just like making us cringe, that makes them comfortable, and they buy into those stereotypes. Brittany in her book, and my daughter introduced me to this book. It's called Eloquent Rage. She says that one of her coworkers said, "Oh yeah, people say I'm just like a black person because I'm always shaking my neck and doing this and doing that." And Brittany said that she knew then that the things that we do that maybe are indicative to us, they adapt, thinking that they too can do those things and be acceptable, not knowing it's offensive.
That's interesting you say that, because I know when Dave Chappelle, if you guys remember when he was on the networks years and years ago, and I think my son and their generation, they're just really catching up to Dave Chappelle, but we all know we grew up with Dave Chappelle, and he was a brilliant comic, but he would always go on that edge, having caricatures that didn't necessarily emulate Black pride. And I remember him saying when he just quit, and people couldn't understand why he just quit. And he said one day he was actually acting out a character, and he realized that the white producer wasn't laughing with him. He was laughing at him. And that's when he said that he would never again put himself in a position where people were laughing at us instead of with us. I'm going to give you guys the last word. I think that, I think we've talked about this whole zest for wanting to get likes and views, and it's all about the money, using that as a basis for just about anything, and saying that the line just keeps getting pushed back further and further and further. And the justification is capitalism. And if I'm making money, then I'm empowered. But I would argue that you're more enslaved. You're not empowered if someone can make you do the minstrel shows of old simply because you're getting paid to do that. And I think as more of us challenge some of these negative images and stereotypes to say, that's not our reality, and to make sure that we're instilling that in our children and in our friends, to say that's not our reality. And we have to say that we're not going to accept that, because then that's just like that 30 pieces of silver. And what's the dollar amount that you're willing to sell out your own culture? Dr. Dean, what say you?
I absolutely agree with what you're saying. And like with Monique, she didn't approach the ladies at the time, but she did make a statement. That's a start. I feel that when people say certain things to us, that we need to address it at that time. For example, my whole life, because I am fair skinned, people have called me a red bone, or more recently in Texas, a gentleman called me a milk bone, which I had never heard of, but I addressed those issues. And, of course they were my patients, but I did address them, that I am a fair-skinned African-American woman. And I would appreciate, calling me a red bone or milk bone, that, is inappropriate. So when things happen to us, I think that we should address it. Address it professionally. But again, it goes back to knowledge, because some people, their reality is their reality TV, and as we said earlier, reality TV 9 times out of 10 is a facade versus being real. And some people can't differentiate between that.
Wow. Yeah, that's the first time I've ever heard of milk bone, but I think you're absolutely right. You have to teach people how to treat you. You absolutely do. Dr. Mebane, what say you?
Well, I say that people who are in positions of, let's say, power need to not be afraid to say no. Not be afraid to say that is not a role for me. Not be afraid to say I don't know how that would have a positive impact on my community. People have to become more reflective of the work they do and the work they produce, and think about, how will this affect even my own child? What will my own child think of me? And I think even someone like Tyler Perry said, because I haven't liked all his characters, that at some point he stopped doing that Medea character because he had a son, and he didn't want his son to always identify him as a caricature and not a person. So I think people who go to film, drama school, all these media outlets need to have a different mission statement about the work they put out.
Wow. Both of you have been dynamic and amazing. I want to thank you both for coming on the show. And hopefully we can start this conversation in a lot of living rooms, and people say, you know what, it's about choice. Because maybe if more of us start turning the channel off,
Exactly.
stop watching it, it'll stop being produced.
Exactly. If it doesn't get the feedback that it's craving, it will stop being produced.
Stop.
Thank
you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Bessie,